All right, welcome to week 5, the forum this week. We're covering chapters 15, 16, and 17. Chapter 15 deals with the rise of asymmetric warfare and the challenges related to the military control of space, especially as it relates to our frequent occupations of other countries. I think certainly we should talk about, I think a lot of this discussion is basically organized around our experiences in Afghanistan and Iraq. They talk a lot about sort of the challenges associated with managing asymmetric threats. And I think it's important in this chapter that we understand the differences between terrorist organizations, insurgencies, and violent extremist organizations because, again, how you approach them is going to be very important. And if you understand their motivations, you're in a better position to manage the threat. Important is in this chapter is this idea of organizational versus technological asymmetries. That from an organizational perspective, a lot of times, insurgent organizations or terrorist organizations have a nimbleness that make them very difficult for an organized military like the United States to respond to them. Technological, asymmetries, the rise of things like improvised explosive devices that are able to attack at the cracks within our military, the fact that we have to move troops and supplies around, and that makes very useful targets of opportunity. Chapter 16 explores the tools available to the United States in waging asymmetrical warfare and the challenges associated with what we call winning hearts and minds. That's an oftentimes used phrase when we talk about counterinsurgencies, because the reality is that if a population is not willing to be controlled, it is effectively uncontrollable. They can render territory ungovernable, as we have learned over and over again in both Afghanistan and Iraq. This chapter they talk about counterterrorism only approaches, light footprint approaches, and the idea of a 3-block approach. And each of these again represent sort of modulations of the use of force, right? Is boots on the ground going to solve the problem, or does it simply contribute to the problem? And again, when you're dealing with countries and cultures that are fundamentally distinct from your own, it becomes a lot harder to manage those kinds of conflicts. And then chapter 17, it's the first 2 chapters really kind of feed into one another. Chapter 17 is jarring in this sense, in that it's dealing with nuclear policy and the politics and the morality behind the ideas of deterrence, right? I think in this chapter, the discussion of counter value targeting versus counter force targeting, and the varying degrees to which those viewpoints, on the one hand, if you're basically threatening to destroy an entire country, how can you claim that is jus in bello, that is justice in the prosecution of war? But likewise, if you basically say, well, we're just going to target your nuclear capabilities, you're basically introducing potential destabilizing technology. And so there's always this stasis that has taken place, especially between the United States and the then Soviet Union, what was known as the balance of terror, if you will, that both sides understood that the other side had the ability to absorb a first strike and to deliver unacceptable levels of damage in reply. Today, we have a much more broken field. Russia still has the capability of destroying the United States and any other country they chose to target. China, they have been very strategic in their development of nuclear weapons, basically saying, we are in a position to hurt you enough that you will be dissuaded. And this raises the idea and the fears of what we call horizontal nuclear proliferation, that more and more countries will see the advantage of having a nuclear deterrent as a way of dissuading the United States from intervening in their politics. And so, what the role of nuclear weapons is within our national security, our broader national security strategy, is evolving, and it's complicated. We recognize that nuclear weapons, that we would wish that nobody else had them, but we're not prepared to set them aside ourselves. And so I think those are important considerations to make as we look at this, at the readings this week. As always, what are when you do your posts, I want to know what you're interested in, but I also want to know what you're struggling with. What are you having difficulty understanding? If I can figure out that, then that puts me in a position to help clarify things. So let's have a very productive discussion this week.